So Howard Stern has been very aggressively pro-vaccine, as we've covered on this show before. Joe Rogan has not been as nearly pro-vaccine. There are times that he says, listen, if you're in an at-risk group, definitely get vaccinated. But he's questioned whether or not it's necessary for young people and healthy people. And he's had a number of people on his podcast, I think Dr. McCullough and Dr. Malone, who have been pretty strongly anti-vaccine, and they've made some very questionable arguments, in my opinion. I listened to both of those podcasts, but for one of them, I was like sort of Google fact-checking as the guy went along, and a lot of the claims were just ridiculous. I mean, that guy Malone, right after he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he was on Alex Jones' show, and he was talking about the Great Reset theory. Getting a little bit extreme. It's getting out there. And as my general take on it is always, if somebody's an expert and they're telling me that 95 or 99% of the other experts are wrong, I'm going to be a little more skeptical of this person, because we've seen it in the climate change debate. What happened in the climate change debate? You know, you have 95 or 99% of climate scientists are like, hey man, climate change is happening. It's real. It's bad. We need to do something about it to fix it. And then you have like 1% or 5% at most, but probably more like 1%, who are either skeptical of it because they've misread the data, or they're skeptical of it for nefarious purposes because they're getting paid by Chevron or some lobbying group that's funded by some big oil company. So I'm always going to be skeptical. So the reason I'm pro-vaccine is because there were a number of independent studies that came out. I don't care about the studies from Pfizer, for example, about their own vaccine, because they usually do juice the numbers, and we've seen it. Johnson & Johnson, same thing. But when you look at independent studies that come out, like that French study of over 20 million people that found that vaccines reduce severe illness, hospitalization, and death of COVID by over 90%, well, then I go, look, that it works. What do you want me to tell you? That doesn't mean there aren't, in some instances, some tiny percentage of cases, some side effects that could be damaging and devastating. Of course that can happen. But that's the same with any treatment or any drug. So anyway, this is my long way of saying you should be skeptical, just as skeptical, if not more skeptical, of the anti-vax voices as you are of Big Pharma. Because I'm a big opponent of Big Pharma, but that also doesn't mean that antibiotics don't work. They do work. So Howard Stern's been pro-vaccine. Joe has not been as pro-vaccine at all. And you have... It was Neil Young who came out and said, apparently his music's on Spotify and Joe Rogan's on Spotify, so Neil Young says, look, Spotify, choose me or him. Either take my music off the platform or take Joe Rogan off the platform, because I think that what he's doing is dangerous with the vaccines. So here's Howard Stern coming out and talking about this, and I want to listen to his comments and then dissect them.
You know, he's not, I don't think he's for censorship. I don't think Neil Young is for censorship. I just think he's saying, look, I don't want to be part of this organization, because if my music is helping people bring people to the table, and then they're spreading something as lethal as don't take the vaccine, do this.
That makes sense.
I'm against any kind of censorship, really. You know, I really am. I don't like censorship. But when you're talking about life and death, like poor Meatloaf got sucked into some weird fucking cult and somehow really believed that he made a statement, I'd rather die a free man than take that vaccine. And now he's dead.
So, don't know if you caught it there, but Howard Stern, in the middle of that rant, said, I don't like censorship of any kind. And he goes on to say he doesn't want Joe Rogan to get canceled. You didn't hear it in that clip, but apparently in the longer clip, according to Mediaite, that's what he said. And the one area where I disagree with Howard Stern is that I do think Neil Young, to one extent or another, is calling for censorship, because if he's saying, hey, Spotify, it's me or Rogan, if Spotify picks Neil Young's not going to be like, okay, no, pick Joe and pull down my stuff. So in other words, if Spotify says, we pick you, Neil Young, and we're axing Joe Rogan, he'd be like, cool. So that is sort of Neil Young advocating for censorship to one extent or another. Now, of course, the reality is Neil Young Spotify is not going to kick off Joe Rogan. So if they're not going to kick off Joe Rogan, they're going to end up kicking off Neil Young. So he effectively is not going to end up censoring Joe Rogan, but clearly that was the underlying implication of what Neil Young was saying. It was, hey, me or Joe. It wasn't just pull down my stuff because I don't want to be associated with it. That's going to be what ends up happening, but he gave them the option. You see what I'm saying? So that's the area where I disagree with Stern, but The area where I agree with him is, look, he's right. There was that thing that came out, 270 doctors it was originally, then I saw another article, or 1,000 doctors wanted to pull Joe Rogan's podcast over the vaccine stuff. And when you read the specifics, actually, it was a much smaller number of doctors, and there was a lot of people in there that weren't doctors, that all the headlines, they were pretending they were doctors, so it was kind of misleading up front. But bottom line is, and even Howard Stern believes this, and he's ruthlessly pro-vaccine, he's like, look, they can be wrong, and maybe there even are terrible consequences associated with this message being pumped out there, but you can't pull it down. You can't pull it down. And that's exactly where I am on this. The way it needs to be approached is all of the claims that are made by these anti-vaccine doctors. Now, by the way, some of them play hide the ball. And they're like, no, I'm just anti-mandate. I'm not anti-vaccine. Well, if you say you're anti-mandate but not anti-vaccine, and then like 95% of your commentary on the vaccine is how the vaccines are bad, and you have anecdotes about how they're no good, and so you lead people in the direction of don't take the vaccine, just stop playing hide the ball and just admit it. Just say, look, I am anti-vaccine. At least own it. Like, at least with RFK Jr., he owns it. He says it. So on the one hand, that's more respectable because it's like, look, you're wrong, but I respect you for at least saying it and not playing hide the ball. A lot of people play hide the ball with this shit. So, but the real way to respond to this stuff is to have other experts go point for point and respond to all of the inaccuracies of Malone and McCullough. And there are many inaccuracies of Malone and McCullough. They are taking fringe positions scientifically. And those fringe positions, a lot of things they said are just not true. So, but that's the way you respond to it. And by the way, what do? They don't do that. Instead, you have some doctors and some social workers and others who are on this list that come out and say, just pull it down because it's bad. Well, then you're making them victims and martyrs, and that's not a good idea. That's really not a good idea. When YouTube pulled down some of the stuff from Malone or McCullough, whichever one it was, then the Spotify numbers shot through the roof because people were like, oh, YouTube doesn't want me to see this. Well, now I'm going to go to Spotify and watch it, and more people even watched it. So that attempt to like just shut down the conversation ended up backfiring massively. It's sort of like a version of the Streisand effect. So now I will say, apparently Rogan is about to have on, I don't know when, but very soon he's about to have on a doctor who is very pro-vaccine. And I'm very happy that Joe is doing that because I think that's the responsible thing to do and the correct thing to do. And I think that person is right on the substance and the facts, and his audience should be exposed to that perspective as well. And it's just about having somebody who's competent respond to all of the points of Malone and McCullough and explain why, hey, a lot of this stuff that they're putting out there is just wrong. And so that's the way you handle it. By the way, there's already been, I forget the guy's name, but there was one doctor who did this on YouTube, and the video did pretty well. It got a lot of views. One guy breaking down a lot of the claims of, I think it was Malone that person did it with. But that's the way you handle this, guys. Nobody should take the shortcut. Nobody should take the cheap way out and just shut it down because it's wrong. I actually agree that what they're saying is wrong, but you have to address it head on. You have to not be Weasley about it and try some backdoor effort to shut it all down. And so I think Howard Stern, apart from the Neil Young thing where I have disagreements with him, I think he sort of hits the right note here where he's like, look, don't do censorship. And I think the reason he feels that way is because they tried to censor him a zillion times in his career. And so he has a soft spot on that. So even though he really disagrees with Joe on the vaccine, he's like, you can't pull it down. You just can't do that. So somebody already did go through a lot of the claims of the anti-vax doctors. I think more competent people should do that to show exactly how they're wrong. And thankfully, Joe is going to have on somebody who's very pro-vaccine soon. That's the only way to handle this. That's the best way to handle this. Do I wish that these dubious characters up front were not given the massive platform? Yes. But just because I think they're so wrong about so much that it is only harmful to give them that platform. But once you do give them that platform, you can't just ban it. Then you're in a position now where you got to sort of clean up the mess and hopefully have on somebody who's intelligent enough and charismatic enough and factual enough where they can break down the claims and people can have a changed perspective about the information that they've currently been given. So anyway, there you have it. Howard Stern, I think, generally hits the right note here. And I look forward to the pro-vaccine doctor on Joe Rogan, and hopefully he does a great job breaking down a lot of the false claims of the previous ones and convincing people that actually they're wrong and the vaccine is good. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.